All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Science versus Scientism, episode 10. This is Cathexis, and of course, we have Quantumeraser on. We're going to be going over the subject of evolution and irreducible complexity this evening. Now, I haven't gone through and seen this presentation yet, so it's going to be a lesson for me as well as John goes through and explains everything. So, definitely pay attention because he's going to be going over some key points here that the elegance of these arguments are usually missed by the mainstream, and that's why I really appreciate John's presentations. But how are you tonight, John?
Doing very well, sir. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we're going to go ahead and get right into it tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and stop screen sharing and put you on, present to everyone. And you should be good. Let me make sure it's good out there. And a quick shout out to the chat. We've got some great people out there. I really appreciate everybody's support. Looks like that we're up and running. So I'll go ahead and put myself on mute and we'll get right into it.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at first blush, this religion right here doesn't appear to be connected to the Big Bang, spinning ball, CMB, redshift materialism, gravity, nebular hypothesis religions. But make no mistake, they're all connected right by the lips. So I wanted to discuss this topic just very briefly because there's not much to discuss. And I usually post these three questions. I always have three questions I usually shoot across the bow first. And obviously, these are pretty easy. I mean, what is evolution? Please post the scientific theory of evolution. Then post the validated scientific hypotheses, the experiments, supporting it. These seem pretty benign, and rational people would look at that and say, well, those are pretty fair and reasonable questions, but you know what? They're anything but in my experience. So after a never-ending tap dance, then getting called every name in the book, including some not-so-glowing references to my mother, we finally get to this. I have to give an example, and even in this genre, I can't even get here. I can only remember maybe a handful of times even getting to these. And I'm just giving them examples of what I want. This is how easy it is. From these three questions above, if we had an analogy towards germ theory, what is a germ? Please post germ theory. So, germ, a living substance capable of developing into an organ, part or organism as a whole, a primordium, and germ theory. A specific microscopic organisms are the cause of specific diseases. That's it. The validated scientific hypotheses, I can bring up Louis Pasteur back in the day, with furuncles, osteomyelitis, and puerperal fever. I mean, this is all that I really wanted from the questions above, but I'll tell you what, it's like pulling teeth. But there's a method to my madness, and I understand why. So for 10 years, I've asked these three simple questions to hundreds of intellectuals in the hallowed halls of academia. We're not talking about just the regular Joes here. All I've received eventually, even from them, was the tap dance, and they even started calling me names. Just from those three questions. Something, something's in the roost. And why is that? Why would that be? I'm going to tell you why. This is why. This is a big reason why. This is from Ernst Mayr. He's a professor emeritus, Museum of Comparative Zoology at Harvard University. And according to Stephen Jay Gould, Ernst Mayr, the world's greatest living evolutionary biologist. He's passed away recently, so I guess this doesn't hold sway anymore, but you get the gist. So let's read through this slowly. You're going to get it real quick. So Darwin introduced historicity into science. That should raise a little slight weathered eye. Evolutionary biology, in contrast, that should be a full eyebrow raise now. With physics and chemistry. Yeah, the actual sciences, right? Is a historical science. The evolutionist attempts to explain events and processes that have already taken place. What does that sound like to you? I'm going to tell you here in a minute. It's the next statement that should jump off the page for you. Laws and experiments are inappropriate techniques for the explication of such events and processes. Are you kidding me? Instead, here's the rub. One constructs a historical narrative consisting of a tentative reconstruction of the particular scenario that led to the events one is trying to explain. That's great, Ernst. Science without experiments. That's a new type of science. They are inappropriate. My goodness, folks. This is like ribeyes without cows. Welcome to an argument from complete ignorance, just so story, his historical narrative, and a cherry on top begging the question fallacy on steroids. One constructs a historical narrative consisting of a tentative reconstruction of the particular scenario that led to the events one is trying to explain. Guess what textbook definition that is? Circular reasoning. My word. How can you have a real scientific theory without experiments and tests when, and this is from Chemistry About, a scientific theory summarizes a hypothesis or group of hypotheses that have been supported with what? Repeated testing. From Quarks to Quasars, a scientific theory consists of one or more hypotheses that have been supported with what? See, it's a repeating refrain here, right? We're getting the picture. From the University of Rochester, a scientific theory represents a hypothesis or group of related hypotheses which has been confirmed through repeated experimental tests. This is what a scientific theory is for about 865th time during our episodes. So what we have here, right? The most validated, this is what we've been told, right? I've been told this so many times. I wish I had $1 for every time I was told this one. The most validated theory in the history of science, right? That's what we've heard. Evolution with no experiments. Only in Shangri-La, folks. And I'll tell you what, the fluoride must be working because this is a joke.
Nice.
This is a joke. Number 3, science distinguishes itself from other forms of explanation because of its predictive powers, correct? Well, from Carol Ward, paleoanthropologist from the University of Missouri, right up the street from me, experts tackle questions on how humans will evolve. Listen to what she says here. Evolution is not a process that allows us to predict what will happen in the future. We can see what happened in the past only. So listen, go ahead and you can email her. I got her email for you right here and her phone number. Go ahead and give her a call. Go ahead and discuss with her your objections. And if you get a chance, go ahead and email Cathexis and go ahead and put the substance of that conversation in. I'd like to say it. In conclusion, crocheting is more scientific than evolution, whatever that may be, because we don't know yet. So if somebody has a definition of evolution or can answer my 3 questions above, feel free. Okay, irreducible complexity, my 2 favorite words on the whole planet. I have to admit to you, I'm usually pretty calm with most subjects. I'll put up with just about anything. But admittedly, when I hear this phrase, something inside me I lose it. I go off the reservation for a bit lose my wits. Combine this phrase with debunked, and you better send the paddy wagon for me. But after a while, I go ahead and get myself back together. You better gird your loins. Gird them. So this concept was well known before Woodstock. This is from Michael Polanyi, Life's Irreducible Structure, and this was from 1968. Now, we all know who popularized this. It was Professor, and you can add the expletive here, your favorite one, Behe, Michael Behe. If you talk to anybody, or you probably already know this name, he just popularized the concept. That's all he did. So let's define this thing. This is really important to define what we're talking about here. And you're going to see, when we define this, you're going to see that the arguments that come against it are absolutely preposterous. They're all fallacious. Well, let's go ahead. So, from Dr. Michael Behe from Darwin's Black Box, right from the book that sent everyone off the reservation. So, a single system composed of several well-matched interacting parts that contribute to the basic function, wherein the removal of any one of the parts causes that system to effectively cease functioning. So let's carry that definition with us. I'm going to have it down here below too, just in case we forget, because this is very important. It's a very important definition. So why did this prima facie ground squirrel level truth, drive people off the deep end? I'm going to tell you why. Because of Charles Darwin. If it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous, successive, slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. The origin of species, oh, they never give you the whole title, so I did. On the origin of species by means of natural selection or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. That's the whole title, folks.
Thank you very
You're welcome.
much.
And that's a big yepper, Charles, especially if it was an actual scientific theory. Because it's not, for one. And I got a question there, Charles. Favored races? Is that the favored races of finches? Just to clarify for us.
We'll get into that later. I got some thoughts.
Yeah, that's the $64,000 question. So, this irreducible complexity, this started out, this was well before I was in the genre. This started somewhere in the beginning to mid-90s. That's when it first, everything hit the fan then. But it really came to a head here in the Kitzmiller-Dover School District, that trial in 2005. Now, we're going to talk about this at the end. I don't want to get sidetracked here, because it'd be real easy for me to go down that lane, but we'll wait on that for now. So, Judge Jones, the presiding judge over the kangaroo court, the former head of the PA State Liquor Control Board, one of his findings from the Dover trial is listed right here. Number 2, the argument of irreducible complexity central to ID employs the same flawed and illogical contrived dualism that doomed creation science in the 1980s. Now, I can't describe in language my contempt for that statement. So I'm just going to give you a little visual on what I feel about it. I think I'm considering making t-shirts. I'm serious when I got this picture, because this encapsulates my feeling on what he just said. And I'm going to get to the specifics here in a minute. This is quite elementary to understand, Judge Judy. Let's use a bicycle. Let's make it simple. You have the frame, the handlebars, handle grips, you got your seat, you got your mirror, you got 2 wheels, you got the chain, pedals, and the flag. We used to put flag on our bikes back in the day. What irreducible complexity is speaking to is that there are certain parts of the system that must be present and complete and functioning to make a bicycle a functioning bicycle. With our parts above, which are absolutely necessary. It's the frame, handlebars, both wheels, the chain, and the pedals. Ergo, the system is irreducibly complex. This is why. This is very important. Make sure this is another important one besides this definition that I talked about before. For our example, let's take a wheel away. Does the bike still function? If that wheel is used as a functioning roulette wheel for ground squirrels, or the spokes are repatriated and used for shish kebabs, is the bicycle still kaput? Does the mere fact that the parts of the wheel are now functioning for another purpose preclude the fact that the bike is currently a football bat? No, it's still a football bat. Will the frame, handlebars, chain, all of them get together and reconstruct the missing wheel? Do stupid atoms and molecules, inanimate matter, have sentience, prescience, and intelligence, engineering capabilities? Welcome to irreducible complexity. It's as right as the rain. And by the way, the debunking blusters from the peanut gallery and that's Kenneth Miller, who I've been chasing down for years, in total argue that stamp on the forehead, straw man fallacy, right? That the existence of the functioning roulette wheel and the shish kebabs disannuls the irreducible complexity of the bike. I mean, it's preposterously ridiculous. This what sends me here. Let me take a breath. All right, Kenneth. Please reconcile this irreducibly complex system. Okay, this is the abbreviated version minus translation, the DNA translation. So, to make one functional protein, DNA, the blueprint or the instructions or the software, needs to be unzipped, read, and copied. It's called DNA transcription. RNA polymerase is RNA plus functional proteins. This is a mind-boggling complex rotary motor, tape reader, and copy machine, not including the roughly 70 other co-regulators that have to work before and in concert with RNAP that, if not all there and working properly, gives you bupkis. You don't get anything. That means the entire process is irreducibly complex. If RNA polymerase is missing, or one of the 70 co-regulators, those are functional proteins, do you get 1/70th of a functional protein or no functional protein? You get 0. That means the process is irreducibly complex. It's as simple as that. And aside, how are you getting the first functional proteins when you need functional proteins coded specifically for on DNA to make functional proteins? Is that like the space shuttle giving birth to the space shuttle assembly plant? I don't want to go down that road for right now. Let's get back on this irreducible complexity. So, Kenneth, after you reconcile this, Kenneth, I have roughly 1,000 more. That is DNA transcription, translation, replication. We have glycolysis, we have the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain. We have gluconeogenesis. All these processes in total are irreducibly written, snotting complex. The actual argument is this. You have copper and iron ores. That's ribose, nucleobases, phosphates, and amino acids. You need the Aerojet Rocketdyne RS-25, that's the main space shuttle engine, or ATP synthase right now to survive. So, show how stupid atoms, the copper and iron ores, make the first piece. I want to see that little maneuver. Then the 1,000 plus additional parts that have to work in concert to make the interlinked system function. This isn't to you guys. This is to Kenneth. You netwit. Sort of this scenario. See if you can follow this. Premise 1. Interlinked systems require all their parts to be present and fully functional in order to function at all. Premise 2. All interlinked systems require prescience and reason. If any part of an interlinked system is missing, the system doesn't work. I know, real profound. Premise 4. Gradualism states that the system comes about with slight changes over time. Premise 5. Such slight changes over time denotes that parts of the system will develop at different rates because it's gradualism. Hence, it's not a functioning system yet. Conclusion: a gradual system will not allow for the initial presence of the functional interlinked system, since the parts required will develop at different rates, i.e., they're not there yet. As in, if you need to swim with the flagellum or the flagellar motor to survive now, what on earth are you going to do without it now? Trial and error for 1 billion years while you're dead? In fact, it's exponential magnitudes worse due to the functional sequence complexity, which we'll talk about next week, of functional proteins. One amino acid in the wrong place, or one non-proteinogenic amino acid, or a racemic version, can collapse the entire secondary structure. That equals it's not functioning. That ipso facto rendering the tertiary and quaternary structure, if applicable, non-existent. All right, the blood coagulation cascade. This is the first one. This was the first irreducibly complex system that was brought out into the public domain. Like I said, it was somewhere back probably in the early 90s, mid 90s. This one was brought out by B. Now, this gets, I'm going to get a little detailed here, but you don't have to worry about that. If you're interested, you can always go ahead and come back to the video, rewind, and go through it, because I'm going to go through here pretty quick. If you're not working with this system, obviously you're not going to catch it. However, you're going to catch the conclusions. So just humor me, bear with me here. So like I said, this is a very complicated mechanism, and I'm just highlighting a few steps. So basically, fibrinogen, it's inactive in blood. You have prothrombin, that's inactive in blood. Also, bear in mind that plasminogen breaks down the clots after the cascade is complete and the healing has taken place. So when you cut yourself, prothrombin is converted to thrombin, which then converts fibrinogen to fibrin, which then forms networks of polymerized fibrins at the site of insult that clots the blood and stops the bleeding. These factors have to be inactive in your blood until insult, or else you'd get runaway clotting and vapor lock. Make sense? So we have Russell Doolittle. He's a professor of biochemistry at UC San Diego. He's the member of the National Academy of Sciences, and he's worked on blood clotting for 50 years. And at that point, he was the world's foremost expert on the subject. He published A Delicate Balance in Boston Review, which is published by MIT, and this is what he had to say. He said, recently the gene for plaminogen, remember this one, we're going to be coming back to this, was knocked out of mice. Then the same workers knocked out the gene for fibrinogen, another line of mice. And what do you think happened when these two lines were crossed? For all practical purposes, the mice lacking both genes were normal. Contrary to claims about irreducible complexity, see, he's talking about B right here, the entire ensemble of proteins are not needed. Music and harmony can arise from a smaller orchestra. That was beautiful. Dr. Doolittle, of course, is wrong and was referring to a paper that he apparently just skimmed through, as in just looked at the title, and not the whole title, but just loss of fibrinogen rescues mice. This paper is loss of fibrinogen. That's getting hard to say now. Rescues mice from the pleiotropic effects of plasminogen deficiency. This is by Thomas Brugge. It's 1996 in the Cell. Well, of course, it's going to rescue them, Professor. If you don't have fibrinogen, the clotting, you don't have clots in the first place for them to have plasminogen clear them. Duh! From the author's abstract, mice deficient in plasminogen and fibrinogen are phenotypically indistinguishable from fibrinogen deficient mice. Listen, this is to say that the new line of mice that are missing both plasminogen and fibrinogen have all the problems of the fibrinogen missing line except thrombosis. Well, because plasminogen breaks the clots down after healing. So the blood doesn't clot. Duh. Hemorrhage. Female mice die during pregnancy. See all the other knockout gene studies that all resulted in offspring death. And these are mainly from Sue and Bouget here. So each time one factor was knocked out in each line, the respective offspring mice died. Very important point there. And it's exactly the point of irreducible complexity that Dr. Behe was illustrating. Moreover, and this is quite troubling, Professor Doolittle obviously didn't know, as evidenced by reviewing extremely superficially another study while being the world's foremost expert on the topic. What does that tell you? The explanation, like I said before, is straightforward. The pathological symptoms of only plasminogen deficient mice apparently are caused by uncleared clots. Plasminogen deficient mice cannot form clots in the first place. So problems due to uncleared clots don't arise either in the fibrinogen deficient mice or in mice that lack both plasminogen and fibrinogen. Nonetheless, the severe problems that attend the lack of clotting in fibrinogen deficient mice continue in the double knockouts. Pregnant females still perish. I know that was a little bit long. Like I said, you could go back and go through there after we're done, or at your leisure. So, but we're not done. Watch how this a priori adherence to fairy tales cascades, and a typical clumsy tactic used by many evolutionists, whatever that is, propagates. Note, in Professor Doolittle's response to Dr. Behe in the previous MIT article, remember I highlighted this. It's supposed to be plasminogen, and obviously it's misspelled. You know, it's not a big deal. You know, the professor, he just made a small typo. It's not a big deal. He surely knows how to spell the word correctly. That's not the point. Michael Ruse, the philosopher of biology and world-renowned Darwinian supporter, decides to chime in on this a year later. This is what he has to say. For example, Behe is a real scientist, but this case for the impossibility of a small-step natural origin of biological complexity has been trampled upon contemptuously by the scientists working in the field. They think his grasp of pertinent science is weak and his knowledge of literature curiously, although conveniently, outdated. For example, far from the evolution of clotting being a mystery, the past 3 decades work of Russell Doolittle and others has thrown significant light on the ways clotting came into being. One step in the cascade involves fibrinogen required for clotting and plasminogen required for clearing clots away. And then he goes on to quote Dr. Doolittle's exact passage from the MIT article. Okay? He friggin' copy and pasted the fine Professor Doolittle's legitimate mistake, the spelling error plasminogen, which should have been plasminogen, along with the erroneous results without due diligence, as usual, and added his color commentary of trampled contemptuously into his mindless spiel. In his opinion of what other unnamed scientists think of Behe, they think his grasp of pertinent sciences, blah, 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 blah. Did Ruse go and ask these other unnamed scientists what they thought or what they think? What a worm. Who else was ready to put the foot in the snare? So this was Dr. Neil Greenspan. He was professor of pathology at Case Western. Check this one. The design advocates also ignore the accumulating examples. I can remember reading this for the first time. Of the reducibility of biological systems. As soon as I seen him say this name, I said, oh, goodness gracious. Let me run out to the garage and get the Louisville Slugger. I know what he's going to do. So anyway, as Russell Doolittle has noted in commenting on the writings of one ID advocate, and we all know who that is, Dr. Behe, mice genetically altered so that they lack either thrombin or fibrinogen have the expected abnormal hemostatic phenotypes. However, when the separate knockout mice are bred, the double knockouts apparently have normal homeostasis, reducible complexity after all, at least in the laboratory. And here's the reference. So this is absolutely pitiful. He not only repeats the same exact mistake Professor Doolittle made concerning the mortality of the bred knockouts, the mice died. Thrombin wasn't knocked out in the study, doctor. It was plasminogen and fibrinogen. This is pathetic and reprehensible intellectual laziness at best, and academic fraud at worst. They deferred to Professor Doolittle without the slightest scrutiny or due diligence, then propagated the company line. Moreover, when didn't the editors of the Scientist catch this before publishing? I mean, this was right in the face prima facie stuff. My 10-year-old would have caught that. There's your science. Take a big whiff. Oh, unofficially, Dr. B finally confronted Dr. Doolittle and pointed out his mistake concerning the mortality. Dr. Doolittle replied back in an email privately, oops, but never retracted his statements. Like I said, that's unofficially now. So one of the arguments that purportedly refuted Behe was the clotting cascade in most land-dwelling vertebrates has two pathways. They have the intrinsic and the extrinsic pathway. They both arrive at the fork in the Y with factor 10A, the final common pathway. Since there are two pathways that can reach this point, the system before the fork in the Y is not irreducibly complex. Duh, why? Well, by the simple fact that there are two pathways, there's two roads to get there. So what is irreducibly complex about this system is everything after the fork in the Y, from factor 10A, which converts prothrombin to thrombin. And that is the 4 steps of the final pathway, the actual blood clotting. The argument and arguments that purportedly refuted Behe was that whales and dolphins lack factor 12, the intrinsic pathway, pufferfish lack factors 11, 12, and 12A, the intrinsic pathway, and jawed fish lack the intrinsic pathway altogether, and their blood still clots. Well, so what? They all have the same extrinsic pathway that leads to factor 10A, the entire point. So the argument in total is a straw man and non sequitur from the Black Lagoon. This argument is tantamount to saying that a bike doesn't need both its wheels because unicycles function with one wheel. My word. We can solve that. This is really easy to solve. Take all these knockout factor and knockout factor 10A, or any single of the following: prothrombin, thrombin, fibrinogen, fibrin, or factor 12A. which is activated by thrombin. And let's see what we get. Moreover, let's knock out vitamin K. It's a cofactor, and see what we get. Oh, and this is going. Then this is quite profound. Let's then cut the mice and see what happens. Why don't we? Jeez. Tip: logical fallacies are fallacious and define critical thinking skills. So sorry about that. I know that was quite long. I needed to go through it, even though it had some details in there. Like I said, you can always go back and go through there and check on the things, on the details that I've talked about.
Essentially, what I gather that was a particular type of, you used the term knockout test, where they're knocking out certain elements of the blood clotting process genetically.
Sure.
And they all died. There was never a way for them to actually make it work. So
now it depends on which one you're talking about, because like I said, it depends on what type of animal that you have, because there's different types of blood clotting cascade systems and in different vertebrates, like I said above. So you have to be careful and specific on which one you're talking about.
All right.
If you do go into this genre, and it's a big, there's a lot of knockout studies. I have a few saved on my hard drive from way back in the day. I started with this many years ago. Yeah. I have a few back there then that are really good knockout studies. Yep.
All right, great.
All right, the flagellum. See, it went from the blood clotting cascade. Like I said, that started in the early 90s to mid 90s, and it went through a couple other systems, but everyone knows this one. The flagellum.
Oh yeah, that's the one. That's the one. As soon as I got put up with back when I was an atheist and I was in these conversations, it shut me up real fast, and I sat there and contemplated it and said, I don't know enough about this, so I'm just going to ignore it.
Sure.
Seriously.
Why, did people challenge you on this?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like in the atheist, creationist arguments back early in when I was an atheist, back like 2008, 2009. Anytime this argument would be put forward concerning the flagellum, and I'd watch videos on it, I was just it was cognitive dissonance. It's like, how could that be? I don't know. You know what I mean?
And boy, I'll tell you what, they were shouting from the rooftops, "Oh, he's out of his mind. Irreducible complexity, that's been debunked." That's all you hear, right?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, if there's anyone out there that wants to debunk this, just go ahead and let Cathexis know, or go ahead and put your comments in the video below. Okay? I triple dog dare you.
Yeah, I'd love to see Charlie take on the flagellum.
Okay, let's go with the flagellum.
Let's go over it, yeah.
Okay, the flagellum, 8 million of these would fit in the cross-sectional area of a human hair. So, the alleged argument: the type 3 secretory system, the T3SS, is similar to the flagellum. Therefore, the flagellum is not irreducibly complex. All right, this is a picture right here. I tried to enlarge it, but it started to get blurry. But that's all right for our purposes. This is the injectosome, or the type 3 secretory system over here. And this is the flagellum. Okay? As you can see, first blush, you can see that there's different parts in these things. Some of them look the same, and some of them are homologous. But you can definitely see some differences here, correct? So let's get a little bit more, just a little bit more detailed, because this is missing some things too. But for our purposes, this will do. So on the left-hand side of each of these diagrams, like I said, this is the flagellum over here. This is the type 3 secretory system, or the injectosome. What this does is inject toxins into hosts. Okay, it's just an injector. It's like a hypodermic needle that bacteria use. Okay, and this over here is the flagellum. So everything, all the parts on the left-hand side over here and on the right-hand side over here are novel, or they're new, or they're specific to each. And the parts here in the middle could be said as homologous. I went in here back in the day. There's a lot more parts in here, and and some that seemed homologous weren't, but I'm not going down that road. It's not, it won't do anything for our purposes here anyway. So as you can see, just watch this. From right here, see where my cursor is, down to here and up. This whole section in here, this is the motor. Okay? This is the motor that motors the flagellum. You don't need a motor for a hypodermic needle. This is the motor system right here, right? As you can see over here, guess what? Where's the motor? Yeah, that's what I thought. We'll get to that here in a minute. So the bacterial flagellum and the type 3 secretory system. So a simpler system that has some of the same parts as a more complicated system, the flagellum, doesn't suggest that the more complex system isn't irreducibly complex. If a system minus one part can perform the same function, that would be evidence. But if you see another system that looks similar to the more complex, but has 10 missing, it could be 2 missing parts, and performs a different function, then at best, it shows that some things are just made using a similar pattern and materials and says absolutely nothing concerning the irreducible complexity of the original, more complex system. A Cessna has many things in common with a Boeing 767, but the design differences require an intelligent agent to bring them about. The Type 3 secretory system is missing the entire motor assembly, for goodness sakes. Only about 10 of the 40 components can possibly be explained by co-option, or like I say, they're homologous. But the other 30 in the flagellum are completely novel. Now, let's get back to the definition. This is very important. I hope everyone gets this. It should get them like a freight train. Let's not forget the definition of irreducible complexity. So, irreducible complexity, a single system composed of several well-matched interacting parts that contribute to the basic function wherein the removal of any of these parts cause the system to effectively cease functioning. You see this right here? What's this say? A single system. Is the Type 3 secretory system and the flagellum a single system? Or are they two separate systems, peradventure? Is the comparison of the Type 3 secretory system to the flagellum a valid, irreducibly complex argument? Or is it painfully incoherent red herring fallacy? I just wasted my time going through all this stuff. It's this. It has nothing whatsoever to do with the argument.
Yeah, but I'm sure you hear it quite often. hence the reason to put it in there. It seems to be their go-to answer.
I can't make this any more clear. Is this two systems or one system?
Yeah.
Are these two completely different systems or one system?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. Moreover, even in their fairy tale view, they must be attempting to postulate that the need to inject toxins into hosts came about, all magical, mytho-mathematical, before the need and ability to swim? Come on! Their own scientists, and I got that little quotations right there, say the opposite. It seems plausible that the original Type 3 secretion system for virulence factors evolved, whatever that is, those of the flagellar assembly. It would have been better said devolved from, since you're missing the entire motor assembly. The next study, we suggest that the flagellar apparatus was the evolutionary, whatever that is, precursor of the Type 3 protein secretion system. So what they're saying is the Type 3 has devolved. You know, it's saying flagellum, then the Type 3 secretory system. not the other way around. This is even bullets right here. All this is bullets.
Mm.
Oh, I forgot about this. All right. From the National Science Foundation, folks, take a look at this. This is the flagellum, right? Look at what this thing has a clutch. There's a clutch in there, folks. Now, I didn't put this in there. I didn't make this up. This is from the National Science Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
What it looks like here is with the clutch, I got my glasses off now, is the gear in here. See, these are proteins right here, these shapes right in here.
Mm-hmm.
And what it seems like is they go under conformational change when another protein makes its conformational change. It induces a conformational change here and disengages the clutch. And this is from a biofilm, Bacillus subtilis biofilm, right? It disengages the clutch. That means it's not going to move, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't put this in there. Even the study from Blair, a molecular clutch, they call it a clutch, disables the flagellum in the biofilm. This is from American Association of the Advancement of Science. This is good. It's good paper, by the way. So, nature, unguided processes, engineers and manufacturers clutches? Really? So, if I throw a hunk of iron ore underneath the tranny on my Jeep, how long do I have to wait before I can be on my way? Or does it have to be touching the engine block? Or how about the windshield wipers? Or how about if I turn the radio on? This is preposterous, folks. Oh, here we go. All right, just a couple more minutes and we'll be done with this. Okay, my favorite trowel, the Dover trowel, what I actually refer to the kangaroo court. So my first question: since when are matters of science adjudicated by non-scientists? I mean, give me a break. I'm sure Judge Jones was able to call on his vast experience and expertise from the chair of the PA State Liquor Control Board. I mean, who's next, folks? MAD, Boy Scouts of America, PETA, Teamsters, your choice. We'll just throw this subject up to them, see what they think, and roll with that. So let's have a closer look. Let me show you what a fiasco this was. So you're going to like this. At the end of the trial, a document is filed with the judge from both parties before a judgment is handed down. So both sides filed with the judge. A document is called a finding of fact and conclusions of law document. Hey, check his name out. Eric Rothschild, the lead attorney for the plaintiffs. Guess who that was? The ACLU. These are the document remarks. I'm going to put Eric Rothschild's remarks, or the ACLU, I should say, and Judge Jones' ruling, okay, for each of these. So let's take a look at some of these statements. This is from the ACLU document. The assertion that design of biological systems can be inferred from the purposeful arrangement of parts is based on an analogy to human design. This is Judge Jones' ruling. Indeed, the assertion that design of biological systems can be inferred from the purposeful arrangement of parts is based upon an analogy to human design. See what he did here? So, Judge Jones adds indeed to the first part of the sentence. At the beginning of the sentence, he adds up to on to make upon from right here to right here. Otherwise, it's the exact same sentence. Nice little sleight of hand there, isn't it? Moreover, Judge Judy, does it strike you as strange or non sequitur when evaluating design that we would look at things that are designed so as to make a cogent comparison to design? I know that sounds outlandish. So let's take a look. What does design mean? From Merriam-Webster. Look at all the watchwords. Create, fashion, execute, construct according to a plan. It's contrived. It's in the mind. It has purpose, intent. It has a specific function. Can inanimate objects design things? Or are inanimate objects the medium used to design? Again, Eric Rothschild's remarks in his findings of law document. So, according to Professor Behe, because we are able to recognize design of artifacts and objects, that same reasoning can be employed to determine biological design. Judge Jones' ruling, because we are able to recognize design of the artifacts and objects, according to Professor Behe, that same reasoning can be employed to determine biological design. I mean, so Judge Jones decides to move, according to Professor Behe, this one right here. He decides to take this one and move it over here, a little further away from the beginning of the sentence. Save for that phrase shift, it's the exact same sentence in total. And Judge Judy, it's duh, especially when you say biological design. Does design mean designed or non-design design? Which I'd like him to, elucidate that fact. So last one. So again, Eric Rothschild. Professor Behe testified that the strength of an analogy depends on the degree of similarity entailed in the two propositions. If this is the test, intelligent design completely failed. Judge Jones' ruling. Professor Behe testified that the strength of the analogy depends upon the degree of similarity entailed in the two propositions. However, if this is the test, ID completely fails. So can you pick them out? It's becoming pretty easy now. So he adds a semicolon and however. That was really tricky. He almost threw me with that one. He added, there's his favorite one, another up to upon, or up to on to make a pawn. Then he replaced intelligent design with ID. It's the same sentence. If you wish, I could post the entirety of this cut and paste fiasco kangaroo court, which besides the juvenile word and punctuation games, is Eric Rothschild's complete ACLU document, cut and pasted for Judge Jones to render. The whole thing is. Boston University law professor Jay Wexler, who opposes ID, concurred that after the trial was over, part of Kitzmiller that finds ID not to be science is unnecessary, unconvincing, not particularly suited to the judicial role, and even perhaps dangerous to both science and freedom of religion.
Wow.
So, I didn't want to concentrate on that. I agree with him. I wanted to concentrate on this. I like when they put this stuff in here. So this is a little sidebar. See the fallacious juxtaposition? You put it real subtle like, right? You put the juxtaposition in there. Science and freedom of religion. False dichotomy. I suppose because people just declare it, especially when it's done all subtle like, it then must be true, right? Gotta be. Here's the real juxtaposition, people. This is the real one. God versus pseudoscience. If you don't think this is the case, head back to episode 2 materialism presentation or just tune in next week. Thanks for your ear. Have a nice day.
Yeah. I really appreciate that rundown. And I'm sure there's a lot of that might have gone over the heads of some people. It definitely did with mine. But please, anybody, go back and take a look at the presentation. I think what I noticed is these seem to be more advanced and complex responses that you've had to like with the flagellum. Take that for instance. I could tell that it's clear that you're dealing with their answer to the flagellum. So you've definitely used these arguments quite a bit, I think, in your travels, and you've honed them to a point. So I would consider this quite more of an advanced presentation.
Listen, it wasn't my intent. especially with the blood clotting cascade, I had to establish the initial condition. And I knew that it went a little bit overboard, but you don't have to pay attention to the details. I laid them down there. Like I said, it's on video, so you guys can go back there and go through it. But my point, and I think everyone got the conclusions from that,
I
from the
don't know,
blood clotting.
absolutely. Yeah, you made it very clear
Yeah,
at the conclusions. No,
good. I'm
I
glad I
agree.
did that. It wasn't my intent to lose anybody or try to go down. Oh, what the heck is a word salad? I put this presentation together honestly about 8 years ago, and just recently went back in because I had very rarely anymore come across the irreducibly complex argument. Yeah, every now and again somebody would just offhandedly bring it up, and I'd jack it yard, obviously.
And that's how they traditionally, like the atheist crowd or whatever, that's how I would imagine the more educated ones attack this issue. They
I
make
mean,
these,
yeah,
they bring up these points that you just defeated.
they're you know what this is starting to make a comeback, because over the past few months I've been hearing a lot of stuff about irreducible complexity. For some strange reason, it's just popping up. And I have to go get the sedatives,
Uh,
first, so, and then collect my wits. But let me tell you something. And I shouldn't have said that to people. I can already see it, in the comments below the video. Irreducible complexity debunked. I can, I would probably do it myself, just to, you know, just to be a fly in the ointment,
but I
just to
mean,
be
is
that
this
monkey in the wrench.
are these common arguments nowadays? You said it drifted away, but I mean, does an atheist, when somebody mentions irreducible complexity, do they run and hide from it most
Oh
of the
yeah,
time?
you know what happened on that Malcolm in the Middle guy. You know what I'm talking about. I was reviewing some of his videos, and I think he mentioned, or somebody mentioned it, and it was a pretty large thread. It was like, if I can remember correctly, don't quote me on this. Something like 80 posts. Everyone chimed in about how it was debunked and this and that. And I said, after I, took the sedative, I said, "Oh, really?" So I put my arguments down at the end there, and there hasn't. I don't think anyone's commented. That was like
Yeah.
5 weeks ago, 4 or 5 weeks ago.
Well,
They
like I
ain't gonna
said
comment on it.
earlier, that flagellum argument is something that I ran from. I mean, this isn't my field of study. I mean, I was approaching
Sure,
atheism from a philosophical standpoint, back
sure.
then. And when the technical stuff like this would come up, it was like, okay, wait, that makes way too much sense. I'm gonna block it out and ignore that for right now. Let me
Right,
focus on this part of,
right.
you know
Because
what I
you don't
mean?
have to be an expert in biochemistry to understand that this system right here isn't this one.
Hmm.
It doesn't. This doesn't have the motor.
Well, honestly, just the fact that that flagellum exists in the way that it
Yeah,
does should be proof enough. But I know they make this false equivalency. They try to say that these are connected in some significant way, like the one on the right, essentially is working with the parts on the left there, and that's, I get where you're coming from. It's
No, the
completely
whole
fallacious.
thing's a fallacy.
Yeah, it's
Their whole
fallacious.
position is a fallacy. Remember the definition.
Yeah,
Remember,
they're reaching.
they're not only reaching, they're making up a straw man. It's a straw man via red herring fallacy, is what it is. And they're clubbing to death their straw. They're not arguing the definition. They're not arguing irreducible complexity. We all know that. Listen, we don't even have to come down here. We could just go to the bike.
Yeah, yeah.
Bike is the answer.
I
Yeah, that's right.
I agree. Now let's go back to what you were talking about in the beginning. Could you read me off the title of Darwin's book once again?
Oh, you want to head back? Yeah.
Yeah, because this is something. I mean, it's
Oh,
more
word.
of a broad issue that I like to touch upon, and
Okay.
it's funny that as soon as you mention this full book name in front of somebody who's a materialist or an atheist or an evolutionist and whatnot, they get really mad. So
I don't
let's
know
see.
why. It's just the title of the book.
On the origin of species by means of natural selection or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. Now, the angle I go with this is if you are to look at the progression from Darwin's ideas to the notion of Darwinism, which was a philosophical and considered in the scientific community like it was a strong idea, Darwinism, then all of a sudden you have eugenics pop up. And we're talking about mid 1800s to late 1800s.
And let's put it in context too, because around that time period, listen, there was some serious prejudices. Okay, so that's the context. Go ahead.
Well, sure, absolutely, but it was still scientifically recognized with esteem, with public support. Okay, even if it is in the context that there was slaves and all of this other stuff, it doesn't matter. What I'm saying is the movement within the modern scientific community to sculpt humanity's direction in the way that they wanted to do with eugenics is horrifying in retrospect.
Oh, it was. There's some bad stories back then.
Well, I mean, let's not be coy about it. The
Sure.
1900s, especially the first 50 years of the 1900s, you could probably chalk up about 100 million people in the wars of World War I, World War II,
Sure.
and through whatever programs that they had, and the sterilization, and I don't even like to go down the whole list of it all, but I I see the connection of Darwin to Darwinism to eugenics to what happened in the 1900s,
Oh,
essentially.
definitely. Oh, there's definite connection. That's the whole worldview or philosophy behind it.
And what people don't understand is that eugenics never went away. It just got better public relations. Good old Edward Bernays saw that the word needed to go away because of what Hitler did. If whatever he did to the fullest extent, I mean, historically, the victors write the history, so we don't know. God knows really what America's done. You know what I mean? Like we
Sure.
don't know the scope of it, but they did. The idea never went away. It just went underground, and we find traces of eugenicists left and right. Bill Gates, eugenicist. If you're involved in vaccine programs, I guarantee your philosophical nature is one of a eugenicist.
What did that one guy? Wasn't he a prince in England? What was his name? If he said that he wished he could come back as a virus.
Oh goodness, I think that was
I
it
can't
was
remember.
the prince. God, what is
Yeah,
his name?
right. I don't know. I can't remember.
But yeah, I think that there's a direct correlation. I think it's quite clear for anybody listening between Darwin's ideas and all the way up to eugenics and
Oh, he was a philosopher. Darwin was a philosopher.
yeah,
That's all he
yeah.
was. There's no theory
And
here.
and what a lot of people I think misunderstand is when we're talking about a subject like this, is that adaptation occurs. What people are modernly think of evolution.
Whoa, stop.
Pardon?
Stop. What? Say
No,
that
I'm
one more
saying
time.
like the change over time, the small change over time. Like you take a look at
Well,
the
you're saying that's evolution?
no. I'm trying to make a distinction here. No,
Yeah,
that's what
I'm messing with you.
I'm trying to make a distinction here. The whole idea of one species changing into another is
Well,
absolutely patently absurd.
you got a
Okay,
problem. You got one problem right there, because species is part of the taxonomic classification system.
it's a
That's
human
a
construct.
man. Yeah,
Yeah, no,
it's
I
begging the
understand.
question.
I understand
And
that. What I'm trying to point out is that's nonsense. Okay,
yeah, yeah.
this is
Sorry.
a just so story
Yeah.
that they've put out as is a creation story, and it is linked to, and a lot of people don't see this at first, but the billions of years necessary for this evolution to occur, quote unquote, is created through a Big Bang cosmology.
Oh yeah, they're all
Is
connected. all
Yeah,
this is
is
connected.
originated through the ideas of heliocentricity, then
Exactly.
extrapolated to Big Bang cosmology,
Exactly.
and it were this infinite universe expansion with etc. And then evolution, the billions of years needed for that, exists in this paradigm. It
Exactly. You
is
got it.
the creation story of the materialists.
Yeah, exactly. You got it. You just summarized it. Yep.
That's it.
Yeah.
And
I couldn't have it better.
people, if they look, I don't care what your belief system is at the end of the day. I really don't. People believe in a ton of things, but people need to be honest about what they believe, and it needs to be pointed out as a belief system. This is a if somebody wants to call any other religion a fairy tale, you're going to have to call materialism a fairy tale too. Their belief system, what I mean in the context of this is a just so story, it is just a creation story. And that
Yeah.
what did how did Krauss put it? Oh yeah, matter can create itself. All you need is a little bit of gravity. Seriously, that's a quote from him talking about
you sure
the
that
Big
was
Bang.
you sure that was Krauss or was that Hawking?
No, it was Krauss. Well, he might have been quoting Hawking, but no, I was Krauss on a panel where somebody asked him about that, and
Yeah.
he said, "Of course, matter can create itself. All it needs is a little bit of
Really?
gravity in the singularity." He was talking about the Big
Oh,
Bang.
so
Yeah,
Matt, so that would mean that it pre-existed before it existed, then it poofed itself into existence. Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, the whole point of all this is I want people to realize their philosophical axioms that are being conscripted to them by this scientism institution that has been beset upon us over the past 450 years or so. It's been getting, more and more. Everybody's trusting the white coats. They just believe them mostly. I'm generalizing, and I'm talking about the
Sure.
public. Most people believe in the Big Bang cosmology and evolution just because they've heard about it and it makes sense. And, it seems to be what most of the scientists are saying. So
Well,
I'm
well,
going to
well.
trust the
Listen,
scientists.
well, listen. They're just whistling past the graveyard because, like we said in the past, how many times there are only two ontological primitives or two worldviews. Only two. You're
Mm.
either a materialist, that's an atheist, or you're an idealist, that's a theist. There's only two.
Yeah. You break it down
And
to its philosophical axiom basis.
and quantum
Absolutely.
mechanics has taken materialism to the woodshed. So you're just whistling past the graveyard. What's the only choice left?
Yeah.
It's over.
People need to recognize the belief system. This is what I've been harping on the most over the past couple weeks is there's nothing wrong with a belief system as long as you recognize that's what it is. Recognize your axioms, recognize why, and people need to analyze if it's rational and reasonable, if it fits reality, and materialism has as is it's bankrupt at this point. There's enough information out here so that we can do presentations like this and laymen can begin to understand how what they're telling us is not the way it is. Their science itself, or science, the body of science, completely demonstrates this. So, once again, I thank you for the presentation. Do you have anything else to add today?
I feel like I just gave birth.
Well, it was
it
quite a
takes
long presentation.
it takes a lot. It does take a lot out of me. It
No, for
always did.
sure. No, for sure. This one was quite more complex. So,
So
uh,
for next week,
yeah,
since I've been hearing, through the grapevine, there's no scientific proof or there's no evidence of God. I don't know. They must not have gotten the memo. I got something for them. So uh, next week, that's what it's going to be on, that and functional sequence complexity, which is going to be a real eye opener for people.
nice.
So
Yeah.
that's all I got.
Well, I appreciate it, man. We'll definitely. I think we got a couple more episodes. I'm really enjoying the way this is going. We're getting great positive responses. So, anyways, thank you so much, everybody in the chat. Thank you so much, John, and we'll see everybody next week.